Hey, church family. I had a thought I wanted to share with you real quickly as we're just kind of gearing up and preparing ourselves kind of mentally and spiritually for the Easter weekend that's coming up. I heard the Surgeon General, he made a statement, I think it was on Sunday, and he said that this coming week will be one of the saddest, hardest, most difficult weeks that we've ever experienced as a nation. And I don't want to belittle that. I can't imagine what it would be like to lose a loved one. And so for the folks that will happen to this week, this will no doubt be one of the most painful, horrible days in their life, that they could ever fathom. But I also, when he made the statement, when I heard him make the statement, I heard it in light of Holy Week, and specifically of Good Friday, which is where we celebrate and we remember the sacrifice of Christ, what happened on Calvary and his crucifixion that happened on that Friday. And I would argue that day was the single most horrible day in the history of the world. There has never been another incident that has ever been more tragic. There will never be another future event that could ever match it, whether it's a surprise attack or a political assassination or financial collapse or even nuclear war. No matter what it is, whether it's disease or famine and millions of people die, no other human being has ever lived without sin. No other human being has ever been God. And so the horror that transpired on that hill outside Jerusalem 2,000 years ago, in my mind, is completely unparalleled. And yet in spite of that, we call it Good Friday. And the statement, of course, we understand why it's called Good Friday. I think of Joseph as he was being reconciled to his brothers in the book of Genesis. He looked at his brothers and he says, "What you intended for evil, God intended for good." And nowhere does that ring more true than what happened on Calvary on that Good Friday. What man meant for evil, God intended it for good. What Judas meant for evil, God intended it for good. God, according to his sovereign plan, ordained it to happen in the way that it happened, and everybody was trying to cause this great evil to come to pass. The Jewish leaders meant it for evil. Pilate himself meant it for evil, and yet God meant it for good. And so the thought that I had that I just want to leave you with today is this. If God is at work doing his greatest good when the most horrendous evil deeds are taking place on the planet, when the worst suffering that has ever transpired is transpiring in the life of the perfect God-man, and yet in spite of the evil that Judas is intending, in spite of the evil that the Jewish leaders, the people, God is steady in the midst of all of that, purposing it for good. And the thought that I want to leave you with is this, is that if God can be doing that, if God can be creating good for his people in the midst of that evil, then no matter what evil we face in this coming week, no matter whether it's just, maybe in your family no one dies, maybe you don't know anyone who dies, but even if that's the case, or conversely, if this is the worst possible week ever and you do end up losing loved ones, what I want to remind you of is that God can use that for good. God can use that for your good. And not only can he, but he does. He promises that he will use all things for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. So as you gear yourselves up for this coming week, whatever it falls and whatever happens, and and we look toward our Easter service and preparing for this. I just want to seed that with you. I want to encourage you with that. I may come back later this week and share a couple more thoughts, because I got too many thoughts to get in one sermon. So I'm gonna leave you now. I'm gonna bless you with that. But just remember, no matter what happens in your life or anywhere else, God purposes to use this for good. Amen. Love you guys.